Hello, everyone. This is Tava Baird, and I'm here with the wonderful and talented,
Jennifer Taylor.
and we're back for another podcast episode. This is six, six,
Yeah,
is that
I think
correct?
so. I did notice, by the way, that you made me answer to wonderful and talented. That was very sneaky.
Just watch out. I only get sneakier as time goes on. I did. I forced you to do it. We have a very interesting topic that's very close to my heart today. And I don't know what's going to happen to this podcast. So we're going to, after Jen leads us in the invocation, we are going to talk about Samael today, and we'll see what happens. So, and whenever you're ready, would you mind setting the stage for our discussion?
Absolutely. As usual, I invite everyone to take 3 slow, deep breaths, becoming more centered, more present in this space and time. And I invite the divine guides of this work to be present here fully. And I invite Samael, as always, to be present, to guide this discussion, to guide our thoughts and words and actions, that we may do justice to representing as much of the fullness of who you are and what you bring as possible. And we open ourselves as channels of the divine to share healing and knowledge and whatever is in the highest good of everyone listening to receive.
Thank you so much. As soon as you started singing, I was writing as that first note came out of your mouth. Really interesting stuff. Sorry, so the people listening don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Last October, out of the blue, as far as from my perspective, I woke up to find a fully embodied entity sitting at the foot of my bed. And as Jen knows, I immediately thought, someone's broken into my house. And then later on, as the conversation began, or the sort of one sided conversation, because I was too scared to say much, I started thinking, oh no, I've had some sort of psychotic break and I need to go to the emergency room. Because when I hear him like someone else is speaking in the same room with me with that same level of clarity and tone and depth to his voice. And when I see him, he is in full color. He is often he looks like he's materially sitting in a room with me or standing in the corner. I can see gestures. I can see the way his eyes move. I can see the way his hair move. I mean, everything is just there. Um, and from time to time, I can actually feel like if he touches my shoulder or my hand, the weight of that touch. Later on, he identified himself as Samael. And while I was raised Roman Catholic, we never were really got into specifics about angels or demons or any of those things. It was very broad terms. And so I went on what I do with everything, a little research mission to try to figure out what was happening to me. And what ended up happening was that he dictated me that I published. The book is now out there. It's called easily enough The Book of Samael. And it has become my best selling book, even though, as I say in the book, I was terrified to publish it because I thought people would think I was losing my mind. He has since become much more persistent. And now, rather than simply dictating to me, he gives me things to do. And as a result of this, I have had some incredible experiences over the past year, both with delivering messages from him and also hearing from people who have read the book who've had similar experiences and have reached out. So today we thought we would talk a little bit about Samael because often when Jen is singing, he seems very attracted to that, very much so. Um, it's almost like putting out a little sign that says, "Hey, Jen's singing, open for business," and he shows up and wants to comment and explain things and talk about things. And I have a uh, inbox full of emails from people asking about Samael and about what he thinks about certain things. Everything from what does he think about the current political climate to, like everything. And so we thought maybe doing a podcast a little bit about him and my exploration of this part of the elephant to refer back to our past podcast.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're sharing about this and that we get a chance to talk about it. And I think one of the things that was so beautiful to me about the first book was that it wasn't necessarily just sit down and write this out as a book to share with other people, but that it was really a compilation of conversations that you had had with him where he had come to you to help you to heal. And it wasn't necessarily from the beginning like I want you to write this for me. I want you to put this
Yeah.
out for me, though it evolved into that. But there's such a vulnerability that you show in that book. And I have so much respect for your courage in doing that and saying all of it because it's a vulnerable kind of thing to say. And for me, getting to know Samael by watching him help you heal was, I think, one of the things that most endeared me to him. Like, not only were his messages amazing and his words were incredible, but to watch him help you and say these things to help you love yourself helped me to know from really early on, it doesn't matter what old texts or things say about him. If he's going to help you the way that he's helping you, he is only good and
Yeah.
trustworthy.
And that's I read a phrase. It was actually online the other day. Someone had done a an illustration of Hades and Persephone. And they had written at the bottom, and I don't know if it's from like a graphic novel or a movie or whatever. I don't know if it's a quote from something, but they had written at the bottom of it, "You are the kindest thing that I have ever known." And that sentence right there, I mean, like I'm married and I adore my husband, and I have wonderful, wonderful, fantastic friends, like you, Jen, and who are just so kind and so generous and so giving to me. But it's that particular sentence. If I had to pick one sentence to describe Samael, it's that. And the reason it applies so much to him is that his kindness is not just extended to me, but he is attempting to extend kindness to everyone that walks past me through me. And to see this broader kindness, it's a level of kindness that I hadn't experienced in this world before, where, generally, like, you make a friend or you have a lover and the two of you get to know each other, and then there's this layer of trust that is built in. With him, you can literally feel his faith flowing in all directions wherever he is. And the other thing is, a lot of times we talk about angels being graceful. He, I think it has to do with the fact that he sees a much bigger picture than we do here on this plane. That he has a very graceful way of viewing things. Where, like I'll be in a car and I'll be, like, oh, that person just cut me off. And he will just laugh and say, they are just human, Umashalla. And it's just gone. It just, any irritation, any whatever, it just dissipates because he has the wider view of what his view is of what we're supposed to be here to do. And these little daily things don't impact it at all, these little grievances. So he's making me a more patient person, I think, the more that I'm around him.
He makes us all better. He does. There's just that the energy that just comes through his words and the feeling of this unconditional love and respect and support, no matter what level of struggle you're in, or where I happen to be in my own whirl of chaos of things that might be happening. And when he's speaking to me mostly through you, the feeling of him comes through still, just like so strongly. And there's just this feeling of being grounded and held by something that is so profoundly loving, beyond anything that you experience otherwise. Yeah, and I start feeling just that presence of him, and I get teary.
Yeah, and the thing that's so strange about it is, so as I've said in previous podcasts, I started off Catholic, and it didn't end up being for me because I wanted to be a priest when I was a kid and was told based on my gender I couldn't. And I kind of always had this feeling in there that I wanted to serve people. I wanted to help them find a connection to something greater than themselves, which Samael has now helped me to rephrase that to say to find greater connection is themselves. But I've been a Wiccan for like 30 odd years. And so when he first showed up and he starts talking about the Garden of Eden and God, I was like, excuse me, I think you have the wrong faith. Like, like we need to find you a priest or a nun or something like that. But what was so startling about those early conversations was that he has a completely different view on everything from Eve and Lilith um, and the Garden of Eden and civilization. He completely, all of those old stories that I was taught as a kid, he has a completely different take on it. I remember one of the first things I said to him, because I'd heard the name. I mean, I knew the story of Lilith, because so I knew a little bit of her story, and that there are books of the Bible that aren't in the King James version, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time with them because Wiccan. It was really interesting to have him show up and me to go, no, no, we speak two different languages here. I'm not the person you want to talk to. And him going, you most definitely are the person I'm going to talk to. He's basically like, this was a choice. I'm not here in error. And then one of the things I asked about him, because in a lot of texts he's described as the king of demons. And they say these things like he's supposed to be as tall as it takes a man, like the distance a man would walk in a year. That's how tall he's supposed to be. And there are all these crazy old stories saying he's got like this long hair that grows out of his belly, like just crazy stuff. And when I look at him, he's very tall. Now, again, I'm feeling my part of the elephant. He's quite tall. Like if I had to put him in this room, he's a good 6'3", easy. He has dark skin, very brilliant blue eyes, like almost hard to look at times, levels of blue. They're so blue. They're like blue on the most perfect spring morning, that sky, that like almost teal blue. He has very thick dreadlocks that reach down past his shoulders. And it's really funny because I have dreads and I could never hope in a million years to make my dreads look like that. I want to be like, dude, do you just walk around with perfect hair all the time? Because he does. And, sometimes he's barefoot, sometimes he's wearing boots. Frequently, he is in gray or tan trousers and a white shirt. I don't see him really trussed up in armor and everything. Um, I have energetically like I have felt wings go around me, but he doesn't have them out when I'm looking at him. He looks like there's a very extremely attractive man in the room. And he is very powerfully built. He's very broad shouldered. If you were to look at a statue of an angel and think, he looks like he could swing a sword with not an issue. He has a very he has a very calm way about him. Um, the whole first book I had now come to realize was basically him going, come on, kid, let's go put your feet in the kiddie pool. And I'm just going to get used to the fact that A, I exist. B, if I exist, that means probably everything else you thought didn't exist does too. Um, and like, just dip your toe in the water here and listen to what I have to say. And of course, I thought this was as big as the revelations would ever get. Then, after about 6 months, when he actually started giving me work to do and lessons to do and dreams to walk through, and challenging me to do things that were very hard, very spiritually hard, did I realize, oh, those first 6 months we were in the shallow end.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were in the shallow end and I had water wings, and now, you're asking me to stand at the edge of the diving board and look into the deep end for the first time, and you're telling me jump, and I'm trying to screw up the courage to do it. And he just keeps saying, have I ever led you wrong? And he never has, but still sometimes that pool looks deep.
Yeah. And you're watching you over this last year and the times of getting to know Samael and getting to know yourself in another way, and all of this work, you have become more and more brave and trusting and willing to take, like, I see you kind of taking these steps faster and more leaps and things as you start to embody more and more of the messages that he's bringing through, that he's giving to you, so that you can also then give to others and share. And it's been really amazing. There's definitely sort of an acceleration that seems to be happening. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, good, now, like we're moving through these lessons now.
I remember he used to, in those first 6 months, he would either wake me up in the middle of the night to talk to me, or he would wake me up just before dawn. Like one of the very first things the very first time he appeared, it was just before dawn. And I could actually see dawn, like the evening stars fading outside the window, and the sun coming up. And he was talking to me about where light touches darkness. And I always try to do this, but are you an angel or a demon? He says it depends on who's telling the story. And he always emphasizes, I am not or, I am and. And that we tend very much, especially here in the West, where it's, hey, it's going to be Jesus versus the devil. Who will win? Like who's going to have the knockout punch in the arena? And we're very or oriented. That it's this or this. Are you good or bad? Or have you succeeded or failed? And his view is that or serves nothing or causes separation. You are either with us or against us. And when you have that concept of or, when you build walls, you are either in the garden or out of the garden. But that concept of or and otherness is what prevents us from progressing as far as we could in this life. Where what we need to think of when we look at our fellow human beings, when we look at the fellow creatures that share this world with us and the entities that walk among us, to think of it all as and. And that I first had that concept introduced to me back when I was in college, and I was doing a series of interviews with Chief Little Eagle of the Mattaponi. That was a different worldview for me, and it was a big pivot, but I hadn't really tried to live it before, and now I'm being challenged to try to live it. One of the things that I think as a human, I often get bogged down in that, okay, but where exactly are you? And like, what do you call yourself? And who do you hang out with? And what he's trying to get through to me is that those lines on the map don't make as much. They aren't really anything if the people on both sides of the lines are reaching towards each other. And of course, this is also all wrapped up in the concept of worth. If you look at the book, I spend most of the book telling him, why are you talking to me? Because you're supposed to be this big, powerful thing. The more I read about you, the more I go, oh, I'm not worthy to talk to you. You're way above me. You're way out of my league. And he keeps telling me that as long as I limit myself by telling myself those messages, I am preventing myself from seeing all of the things that he has to show me. And that it isn't something he can fix for me. It's something I have to fix. And so I know Jen and I spend a lot of time off the air of the podcast, especially lately, talking about the concept of worth. And that oftentimes in our society, we're told you're not worthy of that. You didn't make the grade. You didn't make the cut. You didn't make an A. You didn't make the team. You know, you throw like a girl. All of that, excuse my French, bullshit, right? Um, it literally, I can hear him over here on my left going, it is bullshit. Bullshit. He doesn't curse very often. Once those messages get into your head, whoever told me I throw like a girl, or whoever told me that I couldn't be a priest, right? They said it maybe once or twice, and then they walked away. They are no longer beating me up with it. I'm beating myself up with it. I am abusing myself while they can go off and have tea. And the fact that I'm doing that, that's one of the things Samuel is challenging me to do. If somebody abuses me, fight them. Understand that I am worthy and that I am connected to the divine, that we all are connected to the divine and we are all worthy. What I'm doing with Samael isn't anything special, right? He's and he tells me he's been around not just in this lifetime, but many of them. Every single person listening to this, there is somebody waiting to talk to you. But what he has been telling me is we have to get past our feelings that we are not worthy to hear it. And as long as we are spending all of our energy beating ourselves up, saying, I'm not worthy, that's just delaying the time that we could be receiving these things. And so he's really challenging me to look at my concept of worth. And some of this, I feel like I'm talking a lot today, but of course I would be, I guess,
Well,
with him
that
here.
makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. When Jen was singing earlier, and like I said, he really loves music. And for those of you who are interested in Lilith, he often describes Lilith as dance and music and himself as the word. But I think that's how they communicate differently. Um, but whenever he obviously, well, I mean, he's attracted to Lilith and her dance and song, and he gets attracted to Jen's dance and song. She's got big Lilith energy, BLE, right? There we go. That's what I'm going to call it from now on. Ladies, you've got BLE, big Lilith energy, right? When there is music playing, he comes through a lot easier. So while she was singing, this is what he had me write. I am here, I am here, I am here. It is time to direct this energy. He's talking about, I had a healing experience with someone who was talking to Samael a few days ago, and there's been like a weird energy crackling, sort of undirected in all directions off my skin since that time. And I think he's trying to tell me I need to get it in alignment and actually put it towards something rather than just sort of being a fireball in the middle of the room. Uh, it is time to direct this energy. It is time to step forward. There are words that must be thrown on the fire. And Jen, I kind of think because you and I were having discussions about this on our Marcos about the words that we use and the power that they hold. He says, rethink maybe, the word maybe. He says, manifest. No longer say, I may be worthy. Say, I am. In the beginning come the words, I am. And then the circumstance of the world diminishes. I think he means that the longer we're on the world, we stop saying I am and we start saying, well, maybe I can do this. Or maybe I heard something. Maybe I saw it. He says the struggle then is to rebirth your peace. Find your place of remembering and do not hesitate to lead. Words have power. Song has power. Muses have power. Make yourself a muse unto yourself. So I've never heard him talk about muses before. So this is going to be a very interesting thing to think about when we're done with the podcast today. The idea, well, actually, I'm thinking about it right now, and I'd love your input on this, Jen. The idea of a muse, that you are an inspiration to someone else that lets song and words and art come through. How many of us feel worthy of being someone's muse? You look back at ancient Greece and at the Renaissance and all these things, and you had these artists who had favorite models and muses that inspired their work and appeared in all of their paintings, or that they would compose poems and songs to. People don't talk about that as much anymore. Occasionally you hear like a rock star wrote this song to his ex-girlfriend, that sort of thing. The idea of being a muse, being a conduit for creative, divine energy to come through and reach another person. That's a pretty cool thing to think about being. He's encouraging us to do that, but also at the same time to be a muse for ourselves. And I'm thinking that what he means by that is that we can be both artist and muse. We can have a part of ourselves that is open and allowing divine energy to come down. And then another part of ourself that manifests it, just like the artist does when they touch their brush to the canvas. So, and if you can do both of those things, then that's going to put you in a position to lead others to be able to do those things, to be their own muses. But again, a lot of times I read his things a couple times and then they mean something different later. So that's just my first crack.
Yeah. And then we have like some kind of experience that goes, oh,
Yeah.
that's what he's talking about. So many times we'll think, oh, okay, no, I get it. He'll say coins and teeth, coins and teeth. All right,
Oh
yeah,
my
I
God,
totally get
coins
what
and
that
teeth.
means. And then sometimes what, a month or two later, it's like, oh my goodness, that's what he's talking about. That's what it really
Yes.
meant. And it's not even that the interpretations were wrong, but it's like levels and layers where it's like, yes, and yes, and yes,
Uh-huh.
and then you're like, whoa, I think this is what we were really actually getting to. So I look forward to seeing where this, what this blossoms into as well. And now for, our listeners too, to get to have, it's like they're receiving this at the same time too,
Yes.
and going, how is that going to manifest for them? And how are these messages going to come through in circumstances and situations, and then all of a sudden be like that, just boom, spotlight, like I get it, this is what he was talking about.
And along with the feelings of self-worth, I think we spend so much time. A lot of times we're occupied with loading the dishwasher and getting that report in on time to your boss. The idea of a muse, too, is I mean, how do muses in your mind, listeners, how does a muse dress? Do they dine on? What company do they keep? How do they spend their evenings? They're regarded by people around them as beautiful. Do you regard yourself as beautiful? Do you treat yourself even if it can't be the whole like, yes, we get it. You might be changing diapers part of the day. I mean, I was a toddler teacher for over a decade. I have changed so many diapers. Maybe I elevated it to an art form at some point, but we all have moments that what we might not think of as muse like. But can you find time in your day to sit and connect with that place and say, I am beauty, I am inspiration, I am a unique and gifted being. And I remember one of the things that I always have trouble doing this. This is real trouble doing it. And Samael would often encourage me. He would say, the first step, if you can't think of yourself as divine, he would say, what do you think of me? And I'd be like, oh, you are everything, right? You are everything. And he would say, well, then what does a representative of everything? How do they conduct themselves and care for themselves? I started thinking, if I'm going to walk around on this earth and put a book down in front of me in front of rooms of crowded strangers that say, I have spoken to this entity and I have been allowed to write down what he has to say, how how does that change the way that I carry myself? It's like if you get promoted to be the executive assistant of the CEO of the company, you're going to conduct yourself differently than when you were in one of the people in the trenches opening the mail, right? There's a different, almost becomes self-worth by association. And even just getting to that has been a challenge for me, how to put a little attention on myself as that first baby step towards being able to say on down the road, I really feel like I have divine work here on this earth. I just want to reiterate again, this is the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And I had brain surgery at one point. I was at a market this last weekend. It was 2 days. It was Witch's Pride in Fredericksburg, and it was the bomb. It was so great. And I met so many incredible people and had wonderful opportunities. And Sunday especially was really busy. And it's so strange. People walk into my booth and I have 10 books out. Almost every single person there makes a beeline for that book. And it does look different than the others. It's just got a solid black cover. The book of Samael on it in white. Um, but people go in and they just make a beeline for it. And then they'll read a couple pages or they'll read the back. And then they'll walk up to me and just say, tell me about Samael. And in that moment, there is always this fear, this moment of hesitation where I think I have to look a stranger in the eye, tell them the truth about what has happened to me, I have no idea what their response is going to be. I have no idea what they're going to think of me. I don't know if they're going to edge their way quickly out of my booth. If they're going to start saying I'm a devil worshiper, they are going to think, okay, that's nice for you, but you have lost your marbles. Like I have no idea what the response is going to be. And in that moment, the only option I have is the truth. I can't say, nah, I'm not going to tell you about him. I literally have a book sitting on the table, right? And to try to figure out what they want is impossible because they just got there. And every time I have to find my courage and say the truth. And I have never, ever had a negative reaction. Never. I have had people burst into tears. I have had people hug me. I have had people immediately go, I want this. I've had people turn around and go back and get more copies. I have had people ask me to write, he will write something inside the book. And that is scary too, because I have to sit down. I'm sitting in the middle of this crowded room and I just try to find my center. And a lot of times, Jen, I think about you singing. And then I'm writing and I will put it in their bag and look at them and say, I have no idea what I just wrote. I hope it's helpful. This is a lot of intense stuff today.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't know, I had this thought, and you can tell me what you think of, but I had this thought to stop and sing again for just a
I
minute.
think that would be great. Yeah, I
And
think
that
that
will
would be
give you
really lovely.
a breath, will actually probably just give you a chance to have to scribble down a bunch of things.
Turn the paper over. Yeah, because I mean, literally, a lot of times when he's around, I can feel it in my spine. My spine right now just feels like it would be good to sit for a moment.
Yeah, let's do that. And so I'm just going to invite whatever needs to come through my voice to help to bring in clarity and integration of these messages, a divine inspiration, and whatever is meant to come through. And I ask Samael and I ask Lilith, who knows him intimately as well, to guide my voice, to take us to exactly where it is that we are meant to be in this discussion today.
as humans, we want very much to belong, right? And so we get on Facebook or whatever, and we join our clubs, and we identify ourselves as things. We're very good at labeling ourselves. This is how I label myself. This is what I call myself. This is my clan. This is my tribe. This is my last name. This is who I'm related to. And you know what? Tribes and clans are wonderful things. They are human groups that are born out of natural ways of living. What we have to be careful not to do, in Samael's viewpoint, is build up those labels so high that we have essentially built walls around ourselves and cut ourselves off from being able to reach out and touch each other and realize that we are all part of and. I mentioned brain surgery before, back about, I guess it's been 20 something years now. I had a brain tumor and I was going blind. And I had a surgery. I believe it was 17 hours. I was unconscious for it, so I don't know the exact time. Thank goodness. And actually, it was pretty amazing. They told me I would definitely be blind coming out of the surgery, but they were just trying to get the tumor out of my brain before I ran out of room in my skull. And incredibly, afterwards, I was at Georgetown University Hospital. My surgeon, who was incredibly gifted, he would bring all these medical students through my room and say, "This woman shouldn't be able to see, but she can." And because my optic nerves were being crushed basically by the brain tumor. And after that happens, he said, nerves don't bounce back like that. Like I shouldn't have been able to see, but instead I was able to see. Um, and what an incredible blessing to come through that and still be able to see. What an incredible blessing to come through it at all and be alive. But while I was shortly after the surgery, and I mean, I had just had two holes drilled in my skull, so I'm not great on the details of this, but I had an experience of being outside the world in like a ring of ancestors, looking back at Earth and watching certain souls choose to go down and manifest themselves on Earth again. They had been there before, they had died, they had come back outside the world, they had remembered who they really were in their true form outside the world. And it was the most profound sense of peace and belonging I've ever had. And I didn't really understand it until Samael came along. And he said that what I saw at that time 20 years ago is that Earth, and there are other places like this as well, are basically learning grounds, training grounds, if you would, and that souls can choose to go down and manifest themselves, in this case, in a human body. And we are presented with a series of challenges. And you all know what those challenges are. It's getting to work on time. It's learning to move on after the death of a loved one. It's being brave. It's taking a chance on love. It is all of these things. It is surviving chronic pain. It is finding our self worth. And every time we do these things, where we move towards our own power and empathy and kindness, and then reach out to help others do that, it creates progress for everyone, for the ring of souls outside of the earth as well. That's why we do it, that we are all on a journey together. And if we have all the answers when we show up here for our lifetime, if everything is revealed to us, we're never going to learn anything and we're not going to move forward. And so all of these challenges that are given to us are to help us all move forward. All the things that you have to endure are to help your soul and the souls of everyone around you move forward. And rising to these challenges and handling them with grace and love and creativity and energy is literally what powers the forward progress of existence. And I asked him, I said, where do we end up? He pointed out that just because he maybe have a bigger worldview than me, it doesn't mean he has all the answers. But he's in a different place. His role is to come back and give little bits of encouragement, hold back just enough that we want to keep moving forward without taking away the learning that we have to do. A lot of times I'll say, you have to find your sense of worth. And I'll say, well, how do I do that? He doesn't tell me how to do it. He's just telling me which direction to walk. So I think a lot of times we feel like things get pointless, especially when we're really frustrated with the state of the world around us or the state of the society around us. But there are some things that we can do to help keep our spirits up and endure. And those things come in the form of laughter, song, dance, and storytelling. And Samael is a big proponent of these things. Tell your stories through your painting, dance with someone else, raise your voice in united song. These, he says, are the most powerful forms of magic we have at our disposal. When it looks like they are coming to throw us in prison and take away our joy and our rights, we raise our voices and we sing. And in doing that, we get closer to the wild and closer back to the source, which some of us call God. It was a lot.
Yeah, that there's goodness. Yeah, I think we could spend forever and ever going through and talking and sharing the things that we're learning from him and that he's sharing with us. And I think, he's already been a part of so many of our podcasts and
Yeah.
inspiration and learning and foundations for the things that we talk about, that I have no doubt that he will continue to be a an instrumental part of all of this.
I had people email me before and say, I want to work with Samael. What do I do? And I have to admit, the first few I got like that, I was just like, I don't know. I'm just the secretary. And now I would say you need to go out into the wild and you need to spend time there. Even if it's just getting out of your house for 15 minutes a day to go sit somewhere and touch a tree and touch the earth and, you know, wiggle your toes in the grass. That first step is remembering your wildness and learn from all of the things and all of the creatures that pass by you in that wildness. That's what we're being directed to do. And second, think of the things that made you happy as a child when you were closest, when you had just been incarnated again. You made a brave choice. Come down here and help carry us forward. You could be sitting out in that, ancestral living room watching us and cheering us on, but you came down here and you endure pain and disappointment and isolation and loneliness. These are all things you endure. Heartbreak, all of these things. And yet you do endure. You are never alone. You have never been alone. There are rings of ancestors watching you and cheering you on. Find ways to dance, find ways to laugh, find ways to create art, and heck, gather around a campfire with some people and sing every old camp song you know. These are the things that made you happy as a child. You wanted to go out in the woods and or the garden and look at a butterfly. You wanted to color. You wanted to do sing-alongs. These are the things that are essential to our human nature. Do those things. and the path before you will become clear. And the guide that's meant to speak to you will have an easier time letting you hear them.
I fully agree with all of those things. And I think as you were talking and things that you were sharing that Samael had said, and then kind of some of what you were saying here, and especially with people wanting to see how can I receive this, and a lot of it comes down also to that idea of worth and the idea
Mhm.
of am I am I really good enough? Am I somebody that can do this? And just this past week, I was talking to Sekhmet about owning my bio and feeling like, can I really say this? Like, I know this to be true. And yet, what if, what if? And her answer to this to me has a lot, really ties into so much of what Samael was saying. And that the idea of, we're putting ourselves below, as there's a hierarchy of importance and worth, putting ourselves below him, because it's like, well, I'm not a seraphim, I'm not a goddess, I'm not these things, I'm and it seems like he's continually saying things about, no, like that he has respect for us being here, and that they all do. And so I wanted to, I just thought I would share something that Sekhmet had said kind of along these lines, as far as
Yes.
helping people to understand more of the perspective of those that you're wanting to connect with and you're wanting to bring through. And she said, you just own it, embody it, embrace it as yours. It is who you are, it is who I am. We are one. You are not meant to serve me, but I you. I am in service to your light and your mystery and your path on this great earth, that you might carry us all forward. Those who think that I must be worshipped have it wrong, a misunderstanding, an issue of worth. We are all travelers along this path together and must not put one above the other. To bow down to me is to deny your power, and my role is to remind you of your power. It does not serve to have you deny yourself before me. And she had gone on to, address a number of things, but I
Yep.
felt like there's, for me, the worthiness of receiving the messages. And so it was like, wow, well, why would you take your time for me? And all of those things. And I've heard this message through a lot of teachers that I greatly respect, who have been on this spiritual path for many, many years, and learned from people all over the globe, and ancient wisdom teachings. And they're all saying the same thing too, that we have to see that we're all in this together. Everything that we're doing here on earth and that others are doing in different parts of this galaxy are all moving, and all galaxies are all moving everyone forward as we learn and grow, and that there's a mutual respect for all of the roles that each of us plays, and that the more we can step into our owning and respect for our piece in the puzzle, then it'll be a lot easier to receive the messages, because then it's like we're on the same elevator. We've gotten on the elevator and we get off on the same level of the building where they are. It's like, okay, now we
Yes.
can talk, because you're not trying to like shout out up at me or hear me from somewhere that you have placed yourself so much further below.
Yes. And the other thing is to look, I think it's also important for us to look at our experiences in the faith we were raised in. So that formative, you can't be a priest, right? That sat in my heart. And basically, what I became convinced of at that young age, because when you're young, you take the word of adults as though it is gospel, right? You don't know any different. You're trying to get as much experience as you can in a new plane. You're trying to figure out how to work this new body you've been given, and it doesn't a lot of times follow your commands. And I was basically taught that I needed to have a priest to talk to God, right? It has taken me, and I said to Samael, how come I couldn't hear you before? It took me 51 years to get over the belief that I needed to have a priest to hear the divine. And I also asked this of Samael. I said, if I've had dreams of the Morrigan and I had a Reiki experience with the Morrigan, how come I can see you so clearly, but I don't see her like that? And he challenged me to examine, would I be more likely to accept divine words from a man or a woman based on the culture I was raised in? Now, I am a proud feminist. My first thing is be like, of course I would accept them from a woman, but that's not what I was taught as a child. And I noticed something else the other day. I was at Pagan Pride, and I have a lot of wonderful friends there, both male and female, who are psychics, who commune with spirits. And I realized something. The majority of the men that I encountered, I never hear them say, I'm not sure if I'm getting this message right from the divine. I a lot of times doubt that I'm hearing what I'm hearing. They never express that. Yet almost all of the women healers that I run into do. And I've started asking a bunch of them, what faith were you raised in? And even if you weren't raised in a particular faith, our culture tends to put men in roles of religious power. And so I think, and I'm not saying anything bad against men. Holy cow, I love men. Okay. But what I'm saying is, I think women in our society have an additional hurdle to overcome in that we may have been taught by our society. You don't run into a lot of priestesses. You tend to you run into men of the cloth, and they're men of the cloth, right? Where our society goes, oh, yeah, of course you have a special relationship with God. We don't have as many female figures in our society that do that. And so there's this extra layer of doubt in our hearts. And I also said to Samael at one point, because he actually talks, I asked him about sex in the book. And first of all, he's like, basically thinks humans spend way too much time thinking about sex. But was very interesting to me because he is not caught up on the idea of gender at all. He has a very strong, what I would describe as masculine energy whenever he's in the room. But the idea of I am male, I am female is not, it's never really a part of much of what he says. He just is, I am. And so it's very interesting to me, this idea of he is something other than human, and he sees identity and gender very differently than we do. And I almost wonder if I had been raised in a society where I had female religious leaders to look up to, would he be appearing to me in the same form? Or would he be appearing to me in a different one? And I can never know because I wasn't raised in a different society. But it's definitely something interesting to think about is that, if you do have those doubts, to stop and think back, where do these doubts come from? If I know that I hear and see these things, if I feel this energy moving through me, if this is real to me, but I am worried about everyone saying, oh, you've got it wrong. Oh, you're not the real deal. Oh, you don't like what gives them more credibility than your credibility? Could it be the society that we live in? And is that fair? And that's one of those things that Samael wants us to turn to dust in our hands.
And that leads me then to another part that I wanted to say that Sekhmet had said along those lines of the comparing what somebody says that she sounds like to what she sounds like to me, or that sense of, well, what if somebody thinks I'm a fake? What if they say, well, you don't know who Samael says is. He says he talks this way, or and mine really specifically was like, well, what if people say that Sekhmet's like this, or that she's like this, but to me, she sounds this way, and there was this kind of fear and thing that I was working with her on that, and she said, let me see. She said, "Do not compare others' words or experiences of me with yours. I speak to everyone differently according to their path and their needs and their perspectives. You doubt this, as I seem more nurturing and gentle with others. All right, I'm going to say that again. You doubt this as I seem more nurturing and gentle than others have spoken of me as. You do not need a firm hand. You are too firm with your own hand against you.
Amen.
Harshness at this time would not serve you or help you on your path. It does not mean you have it wrong. Just as you have been a different mother to your different children, not all need a firm hand. Some need the hand to be held back from them to experience acceptance and gentleness and love." And so I thought, I was like, okay, I think I need to share that too, because it really helped me. And, it's like, well, of course,
Yeah.
I'm not going to give the same advice or talk the same way to any of my various children as I would to any of my different friends or the different students that I have. The way that I teach, the way that I sound, you could take 5 different students and there would be some things that they would agree on, but some of it would be like, oh no, she really focuses on this, or no, she really focuses. And that's because that's how you reach each person
Yes.
exactly, where they are. And so, if you hear something that sounds really different than something, a book that you've read or things that you've Googled about, whatever sort of divine being you're working with, don't automatically throw your experience out the window. It's
Right.
like that was my first inclination, was if somebody else has said it or written it and I receive something different, well, clearly I'm wrong. It's
Yeah.
like,
And
no,
it's
they
like,
just typed it up and put it out there. It doesn't mean they're any more right than I am. We're all
we're at a
just, it's like
different,
the elephant
yeah,
thing.
they're the
We're
different
on a
part of the
different part of
elephant.
the elephant.
And we can say that to people. I've been really shocked at how many people have similar, like I had someone who came up to me and uh, I had a and he looked at the book and said, he speaks in this book the same way I've heard him speak. It sounds like him. You speak to each of your students differently. You speak to each of your children differently. We're each being given to hear what we need to hear at this time and see the mystery that moves us a little bit forward in our learning. And, if somebody comes up and says, well, I think you're a fraud, well, you're in a different part of the elephant than I am, and you're also rude, right? Because if you're standing at the butt end of the elephant and going, this is my experience of the divine, and I'm standing at the trunk, and you're telling me you've got the story for the entire elephant, I would really like to know about that, because the odds are you don't, especially when we have entities like Samael who telling me he doesn't have the story of the whole elephant. He's very clear. He says, I'm not a god. Don't worship me. That all of these different divine entities and beings they are all on a journey just like we are. They're just in different places than we are, right? And so if Samael doesn't have the entire story of how everything works, I certainly no human certainly does. But what we're trying to do, and the whole reason for this podcast is to say, this is what I've got, and I'm looking. What do you have? Person in your car on the way to work, what have you got? If there's anybody out there listening who's had an experience with Samael, please write and send it to me. I would love to hear from you, because if, as we lovingly trade information, when we're feeling our way around the elephant, sometimes our hands might touch. And that's a wonderful thing.
It's the most beautiful thing when we have encountered a different part of the elephant. You know, like
Yes.
when I encounter somebody who's like, oh my goodness, I work with Sekhmet, or to find out they've had interactions with Sekhmet, it's like, oh, this is wonderful. What have you
Yes.
learned? And, I
Yes.
had that with Natalie Southgate because Sekhmet is one of the goddesses that we do in chakra dance. And so she was talking about, the messages that she had given her and the
Mhm.
tools that she had told her to use. And I was thinking, well, this is amazing because I haven't gotten that, but I could totally use that. I could work with her that way too. And so I've used some of the things that she had said and I shared with her too. It was like, just in case other people are like, I've been talking to Sekhmet, but
Right.
I had gotten something different, rather than discounting it. There are lots of different ways. She has me clear things by eating them. Like she'll
Yes.
make me eat them. Like I have to eat it and swallow it and transform it in my belly. So if you're working with Sekhmet and all of a sudden you're told to eat something and swallow it
That's
whole,
yeah,
don't
that's
freak out.
happened
That's
before.
also
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, it's
And
great. And that sort of stuff is so good to know. It was really interesting talking to Angel at that thing. And I said, I keep hearing everybody gets a cup. Like, what cup? I've seen no cup, right? And he goes, oh yeah, the cup has to do with Lilith. And I was like, and he just said it like, oh yeah, this is common knowledge. And I was like, I don't have a cup. And he's
why
like,
don't I
you're
have
not,
a cup?
and he's just like, yeah, like, why is everyone else getting a present and not me? And he's just like, that's not your job.
I think that's the challenge for us, is when we encounter people who have really different experiences of them, to not worry about the way that, because, I think she'd given her a shield or this circle of fire or certain things. And it was like, well, yeah, it doesn't mean that I'm not as good as she is, or that it's like, well, we
Right.
need different tools. We're doing different things. Like you're building a house. Well, you're not going to give a hammer to the person who's, pouring concrete for the foundation,
Exactly.
and you're not going to give a bag of concrete to somebody who needs to get the roof shingles on. It's like we're all doing different things, but it's easy to discount and be like, oh, well, they didn't give me a hammer, so like
Part of the
now I'm not as
club.
good as
Yeah.
you are. It's like, well, you're pouring the foundation, so of course
Yeah.
they're
You
not. What
don't
are you going to do
need a
with a
hammer.
hammer?
Yeah.
It's like to accept that, of yours isn't better than mine, mine's not better than yours, and
Right.
what can we learn and share.
So we'll
And
see. So I look at it this way. If you if you're allowed to be a priest and say, this is my experience of God, that's great. But it doesn't mean I'm not allowed to touch the divine as well, right? This is a license that we want to give ourselves, and it's hard. Like I sound like I know what I'm talking about, and I all have all these convictions right here on this podcast. I will tell you, when I first wrote the Samael book, and I would not have written it if it wasn't for you, Jen, because you told me write all this down, and I thought, what is she crazy? I don't want documentation of my insanity. You and I went and had coffee with a woman I really respect, a dear friend named Michelle, who runs a fantastic yoga business up in Maryland. And I told her, I've written this book. I'm afraid to put it out. And she asked me if I'd heard of Elizabeth Gilbert. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but she's also written a book called Big Magic. In that book, Elizabeth Gilbert poses this idea that there are wonderful ideas and messages coming into this world all of the time. And each of us is being given opportunities to deliver those messages. And if we're too scared to do it, it doesn't mean the message or the idea or the inspiration goes away. It will simply find its way in through another person. And so Michelle said to me, the question is not, should you publish this book? The question is, how ticked off will you be when someone else publishes it? And I realized in that moment, I didn't want someone else putting down Samael's words in this book. I wanted to do it. I wanted it to be me. We're going to be hopefully doing a whole series on different goddesses and bringing them through and their connection to chakra dance and all sorts of things in a series we want to call Season of the Goddess that will probably take place between Samhain and Yule, or think Halloween and Christmas, right? Samael is the first entity we're talking about because I have now daily experience with him. I want to thank you so much for all of your time and attention and listening to what he had to say because you are helping me do my job.
And so I will just sing us a little closing blessing. Amen, and so it is.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Until next week, go out into the wild and become your own muse.